about the unconscious being superior to conscious mind because that's where you combine ideas, but that sort of implies that you couldn't do that consciously.
Well, I think a lot of people around here use
brainstorm techniques or creative sessions or whatever to consciously work on ideas.
That's a very good point. In many ways, our unconscious mind is superior to our conscious mind. Not in every way. For the real aha moment is actually created by our unconsciousness because it always, per definition, comes when you don't expect it. But the brainstorm is a very good example of the fact that we are able to consciously come up with ideas. But there's more reasons why the unconscious is superior. For example, the way it filters stimuli. When you hear a lot of chatter and you hear your own name, all of a sudden you pick out your own name. That's something that we don't do consciously. It's our unconscious mind that says, this is all clutter, not interesting. But when it hears its own name, it goes like, hey, this might be interesting. That's an example. Another example is intuition. Intuition is actually based on knowledge. So when you work in a creative domain for a long time, at some point you make decisions on your intuition. You just feel that something is the right choice. You just feel that you have to go left instead of right. And when we try to rationalize these choices, we often get stuck. Sometimes when you have to make a very difficult decision, and this is actually, I think, a very good example I read in a book about our unconscious mind. For example, you want to buy a house, and there's like 5 houses that all have different merits. So one has a very big garden, one is not very expensive, one is a really nice neighborhood, and that in a sort of mix. So every house has certain pluses and certain minuses. When you try to rationalize your decision on choosing a house, it's very difficult. But when you sleep over it and you wake up in the morning and there's just one house you sort of feel drawn to, then you can actually follow that choice. It's your intuition that makes it, and it's your unconscious brain that has put all the pluses and minuses, you could say, in a matrix. And when you do that consciously, it's very difficult. But when you just trust your intuition, then you can actually make the choice quite easily. The only thing is that many people don't trust their intuition, so they first want to rationalize their choice. And that's another example of how your unconscious mind has so much more processing power and space to combine ideas. And the combining of ideas. Another example is that. A very simple example that sometimes when you're trying to write an email and it's not working, you get stuck in your email because there's all these things that you want to put in, and you want to be polite, but at the same time you want to be firm, and like you're having a hard time formulating that email, and then you go to the coffee machine and you walk back, and then it's there without hesitation, and that's because your unconscious mind is still working on that email. And that's a very simple example, but it also works in the creative process like that. You've been struggling with an idea all day, and then finally when you cycle home, all of a sudden you know the answer. And that's not your conscious brain, because you're thinking about what groceries you want to buy in the supermarket. So yes, you can definitely consciously come up with ideas, but your unconscious brain is better at it.
If you would not be working in advertising, what would you be doing today? Or what would you like to be doing instead?
I understood it the first time. It's a difficult question. No, well, the thing is, I'm doing a lot of stuff next to the work in advertising, and one is writing. I write columns, and I've written a book, and I blog a lot. And I'm perfectly happy doing that. I would actually, my ideal life would just to be traveling around the world and working from my laptop, and then writing a bit, and giving some lectures. So.
First of all, thank you for the talk. I really enjoyed it. In the beginning of your presentation, you showed us a quote about Einstein. and afterwards you said you didn't fully agree with him because you thought you needed pieces of knowledge in order to be creative.
In order to imagine, yeah.
In order to imagine. Yeah, okay, that's something. Yeah, because I was wondering at that point, sometimes knowledge can also block your creativity. Because there are cases, for example, big companies who want to innovate, they are blocked by their own knowledge, blocked by their own imagination, well, how far they can think. And then you need people who don't have that much knowledge.
Very true.
In order to break out of that.
Yeah.
So what's your view on that?
There's a model for that, and it's called the inverted U. It goes like this. So when you start learning about a domain, the creative potential grows. Because as I said, the more you understand, the better you understand the creative domain, the more easily it becomes to combine knowledge. But at some point, the line goes down again. For you guys, it's like that, obviously. And then that's when knowledge starts to block you. So when you become an expert in the domain, and that's, I can talk about this for hours, but every domain has experts. And they, for a large part, they decide what's an interesting new idea in the domain. And one example is a DJ that plays a song on the radio. So it allows an idea to get a bigger audience. Or the gallery that exhibits a young, aspiring artist. The gallery decides this is an interesting new idea. But these experts, very often, they have a hard time coming up with new ideas themselves because they're so stuck in their knowledge structure and all the details are there. So they really have a hard time to sort of zoom out from it and look at it from another perspective. So all the grooves, you could say that all their thinking grooves are so deep that they have a hard time sort of stepping out of it. And there's another thing, because the more creative ideas are actually made by combining knowledge from one domain with that of another domain. And maybe this goes too much in detail, but when you're stuck in your own domain, it's hard to sort of, as I said, zoom out and look at other domains for maybe interesting ideas that you could combine with. So, very true.
Now you describe a company as a creative field.
Yeah, can be. An accountant can be creative as well by creatively accounting. But you're right. You have autonomous artists that throw literally shit against a canvas and say it's art, you know. And you have, for example, Google. That is a very commercial organization, but also is being creative. The problem often with having clients, like an advertising agency, is that the client looks over the shoulder of the creative and say, I want my logo bigger. So it actually sort of dilutes, the client dilutes the pure creativity. But there's definitely creativity involved. And the thing about creativity is, and you've probably heard this before, is that everybody is creative. It is true. You can even be creative in your kitchen when you have 3 ingredients in your fridge and you can still make a meal out of it. You're combining different ideas, different pieces of food, different ingredients, combining them in a new way, or actually thinking, I have this meal, but I still have a piece of this in my fridge. I'm going to put it in there, just see how it tastes. That's also creative, not on a very high level, but it is creative. So even when there's a commercial external party involved that sometimes frustrates the creative process, it's still a creative process.
Can I ask something else? How do you get fear away of being creative? Because you're talking about failure is good, blah blah blah. But how do you get people to get into the failure? You understand what I mean?
With confidence. In my book, I talk about the psychology of creativity, and there's many different personality traits that you need to have to be creative. Some of them are about having a big ego. the funny thing is that many creative minds are also insecure, but they're also confident. Confident that they are the ones that are gonna change the way we look at the world, either scientific or artistically. So you need to have a big ego to think that you're the person that's gonna make the change. You need to have a lot of confidence. And when you're always afraid to share your ideas or pursue them, then you probably need a life coach or something that tell you like, you can do it, like chaka. But that has to do, I think, with personality traits. A lot about creativity is in your genes. For example, the talent to be a talented painter or to be very analytical and to be successful in science. These are sort of inherited qualities. Personality traits as well, you know, you can change yourself a little bit, but much of it is ingrained in our DNA. So I guess it learns to understand how the processes work, but when you're the type that is afraid to fail, then that's obviously that's one element of the whole creative process, but it doesn't help to be creative. And
Or if you're in a group and you want to create an environment that everyone is not afraid to feel.
Well, you almost answered the question yourself. When you're a manager or you're a leader of a creative team, it's very important that you give everyone the feeling that it's okay to fail and that you should try. It's when you work in a company and you want your people to creative, you give them goals instead of just telling them exactly what to do. And when you give them responsibility and they have the feeling that they can actually use that responsibility, they might fail, but the output is probably more creative than when you restrict them in everything they do. So yes, a culture within a creative group of people where it is allowed to fail is very important.
I think it's also about letting go. So if you really define your goal like exactly, then more chance you would fail because because it's a very tight target.
Yeah, but
so you have
actually,
some more direction.
Yeah, but then the chance maybe that someone fails is smaller. When I give you a very strict briefing about to execute something, the more strict the briefing is, the more likely is that your output is going to be like I envisioned it. But when I write you a very vague briefing, then the output is probably going to be less what I expected. The chance that you fail is bigger, but there's also a chance that the output is more creative than.
That really depends on what you define by failing. That's also why I said like if you're saying like you have this goal.
Yeah. Okay.
Outside and you fail, then the person has to do it. Like how I'm going to go about this, and if I'm more like pointing in a direction, then it's
then there's no failure.
Yeah. It's no failure, but that's becoming easier. But then it's a sort of a balance because you also want maybe a certain outcome that you say. So that's tough goal. But it was more on a reaction. What was saying?
Yeah. You're right.
Some adding to the conversation.
Last question.
Sorry. So we've been talking about failure and the connection between failure and creativity. And I was wondering, can you share a personal experience of something you consider failure, or and what was the outcome of it?
So she asked if I have a personal experience of failure. You mean in writing the book, or?
Just generally, whatever.
Of course, I never fail. No, that would make me uncreative if I never fail. Well, for example, I'm working on a new website for Amsterdam Adblock now, and I'm doing that with MediaMonks, and they're creating an entire new website. I actually heard someone say that he's from MediaMonks, but anyway, now you know that they're building the new website for Amsterdam Adblock. MediaMonks is actually a very big company, and the design process was very lengthy, and the implementation process also. And what I have to do is I have to check the design whether it's right, and once it's right, they're going to build it. And when they were building it, I realized there were a lot of things that I forgot to mention in the design. So they say, well, it's not in the design, we're not going to build it. It's not that simple, but more or less. So in that process, I have had many times where I went, oh shit, I should have thought of that. You know, it's especially when it gets nitty gritty and there's a lot of details, you always forget something. Yeah, but
What do you learn about that then? That is the sort of feel when you learn.
well, maybe that you should be too hard on yourself, and that's actually what I've heard about myself as well. Like, don't beat yourself up too much. Just accept the fact. I mean, it's even with spilled coffee. Do you say shit, or do you say, well, that just happened? You know, there's no use crying over spilled milk. You know, I like that saying a lot, although I don't live by it entirely. But I think that's, don't beat yourself up too much. On the other hand, the perfectionists are the ones that are making the difference. So, do you want an easy life? Do you want to be easy on yourself, or do you want to just push it and not take mediocre for an answer? It's almost philosophical, you know. I think that you should be somewhere in between, I guess.